What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe.
And Amy.
Review. It's our weekly show where we review the magic stories as they're posted on Wizards' website. And this week, we have the finale of the Guilds of Ravnica stories. It's not technically a finale because there wasn't really a through line. It's just the last of 5. But this one is called Bound and Bonded by Nikki Drayden. Now, once again, let's quickly talk about it. The set, it's Joe, it's right back there. You see it, right? Why aren't you guys sitting on the set? There are boxes in front of it. That's why. Those boxes are because we're moving. We're moving to a different place. It's actually kind of helpful that there will be no story next week, so we don't have to worry about while we are in transition moving, trying to find a place to sit and do JaAR.
A sufficient spot.
Right. We will
better than this spot.
Yeah, we will still have content for you. It's just content that we've previously recorded. But yeah, we're going to be moving probably over the next week and a half. So apologies for this one. First of all, we're still without the camera, which is unfortunate, but we're making it work. And second, our set, as I said, is a little preoccupied. Yeah. So pardon us, pardon our mess as we move. But let's get into the review of this story. My quick review, actually, before we do that at the beginning, is that this one was good. Amy and I talked a little bit already, and we're going to disagree slightly. I think that this story was not as good as last week's, but was still great. And because I thought last week's was amazing, that doesn't and shouldn't take anything away from anybody's opinion of this one. That's my personal feelings. Amy, What about yours?
See, I thought this one was amazing, and I think this one's the best one yet.
There you go.
By a lot.
There you go. And so either way, I mean, we're obviously going to get into the full review itself, but if you are new here, even if you're not, this is just our quick review because, as we always say, we review, we don't summarize. So if you haven't gotten a chance to read the story yet, you can check the description box down below, and it will have a link to that story if you don't know where to find it. Feel free to follow that link, read the story, and it will, you'll be able to find out what happened.
What we're talking about.
Yes, exactly. And come back and give your opinions to us as well, because that's part of the discussion.
Because we actually do care.
Yes, very much so. And hopefully you do too. I mean, that's presumably why you're here. So
we love hearing what you guys have to say and going, oh, we didn't even think of that.
Oh, yeah.
That's fun for us.
Yes.
Sad as that may sound.
I don't think that's sad. I think that's cool. This week, to get into the full review itself. This week, our main character, we find out, is named Tarek. Now, he's a member of the Selesnya Conclave. We knew it was going to be Selesnya because it was the 5th of 5, and it was the only guild from the 5 Guilds of Ravnica guilds that we had not seen.
That we hadn't talked about yet.
So, we meet him, and we meet some of his friends, which makes perfect sense that his friends would take a big role as well, because it is a conclave, the Selesnya Conclave, that they are. But the other thing that I noticed with this story was Tarek's name was revealed pretty early on. And in some of the other stories, that was not the case, which I appreciate. I think that's cool because all of these stories were written in the first person perspective, which means we are hearing it as if we are living inside of the main character's brain.
Right.
And with that being the case, you and I don't necessarily walk around all day when we're thinking, okay, Joe, we need to go do this now. Okay, Joe, we're going to go do that. You just think about your daily life. And if we come across somebody that says our name, then great, someone has said our name. But if not, I mean, there were some of these stories that Nikki has written from this set that had maybe half the story before the main character's name was said, which from my perspective was frustrating because I wanted to know their name so that I could, one, write it down for the show, but also so that I could know who we're dealing with, so I could say, hey, Tarek is really cool, or, whatever, reference that character in some way.
That's interesting. I didn't have the same issue, and I'll say that the reasoning behind that is because the names are so unique. Mm-hmm. Typically when I read a story, especially if I'm attempting to analyze it after reading it, mm-hmm. I very much care about the names, because I think the names really are a window to the type of character that it's referencing.
Okay.
Or it gives you clues to what happens in the story.
Mm-hmm.
But because these names are so unique, because it's Magic the Gathering, I don't find the names to be as pivotal.
Okay.
So, you know.
That's fine. I think that the reason I bring it up, though, is because for me, I appreciated that it never felt shoehorned in. Where if Nikki was nervous about the fact that these names were there, or needed to be there, then it might have been like, you know, it might have been forced. It might have felt forced, I should say. That, like, you know, in every first paragraph of every one of these stories, we get the name of the main character.
Here is our main character. Their name is X.
Right. Because even though what would probably for all of them be like a normal start to one of their days, now it has to be like exposition heavy or whatever, because this is the story that an audience is reading. And so, you know, because none of them, you know, for none of them, this is like, today is my first day alive, right? It's like, this is always like another day in my life. And so that's what's going on there for them. So I appreciated that. Like I said, this one was earlier on that we found out Tarek's name, but it didn't feel shoehorned in. It felt like it was appropriate for the conversation that was happening. And it kind of reminded me of the fact that the other stories were allowed it to come up naturally as opposed to kind of shoving it in our faces.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things. Then, I mean, shocker of the story was like, again, now 3 paragraphs in, when Tarek just mentions, oh, and, you know, I dropped a building and killed 12 people. And you're like, holy crap. What?
And people just expect you to function normally in society now. Yeah, that sounds great.
And I mean, we knew we were going to find out more about it, right? I mean, it was the classic, like, she's talking about the accident.
Right.
Well, what's the accident? We loyal readers want to know. And we obviously eventually find out what that is, and we get a little bit more detail on it, or a lot more detail on it. And we come to find out that, you know, Tarek is giving away measly sums of his money that he is doing to try to make himself feel better to this orphanage that this young girl lives in. You know, it's really only because of that young girl that he's giving the money away in the first place. And it's because he hurt her by killing both of her parents. And
that's some real shit right there.
Yeah. And it turns out, you know, we had talked in weeks past that this was the Selesnya story, and we hadn't heard much from Selesnya from these previous 4 stories, whereas we'd heard little sprinklings of other things here and there. In this one, we had a little bit of Izzet, but a lot of Orzhov. And Orzhov, obviously not from Guilds of Ravnica, so to speak, but obviously from Ravnica, and will be in Ravnica Allegiance, but Orzhov was another one that we hadn't heard a lot from, even though, again, we'd gotten sprinklings of Simic and Rakdos and etc. in some of these other stories, even though they are from the next set coming up. But it just happens to be that they're still on Ravnica. They're still a part of everyone's day-to-day lives.
It's a good way to say, hey, don't forget those other guilds still exist too.
Oh, yeah. So
even though they're not existing in this set, you know.
Right. And so that was nice that we got a little bit of Orzhov this time as well. So I thought that was cool that it was able to be in there, and it was pretty in there. I mean, especially that moment, at least for me, where Bozda mentions that her parents are dead. Like, she kind of calls him out on like, oh, you're the guy that, you know, my parents are dead. Can you bring them back? And he's like, well, no. And he said, but they're probably in a better place. Now, she corrects him and says they're not in a better place. Yeah. And at first, I kind of perked up because Amy and I have done grief work with some charity organizations. And that's something that we have heard pretty universally from kids, in that phrases like they're in a better place or their pain is over now or whatever like typical phrases you've heard of relating to grief. Sometimes kids want to tell you to shove it when you tell that to them regarding their parents. That's not across the board. I'm not trying to make any sweeping statements, but I've heard it more than once. And
whether or not that's something that they believe or not, that doesn't mean they want to hear that from you.
Correct.
when they're attempting to grieve the death of their parents or their siblings or whomever.
And so I perked up when I heard that line, or I saw that line was being said, because I was like, oh wow, I was like, they're really getting into like grief and loss. And to be fair, they really weren't, because the next thing that she said was their spirits are now in servitude for, for however long or whatever. And it was like, oh right, Orzhov. Right, there are ghosts everywhere. It's Ravnica. So it was a little bit of a swerve. I mean,
I thought it was really cool.
So did I. Oh yeah, I wasn't upset about it at all. It was definitely interesting to me.
Because those sort of grieving parts reminded me a lot of those older stories that we really loved, regarding Johnny and Elspeth and all of that stuff, where we're like, the grief theme was so just weighed so heavily on the stories, and it made the stories great.
Yeah.
I think it was a cool kind of little callback to that. And then that swerve that you talked about was interesting and fun.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, it kind of brought you back again when you realize, oh yeah, like they're ghosts, but they are still people, and they're, they still technically exist even though they're dead. And they're slaves basically.
Yep.
So it kind of like took us back to that, brought us to a whole new place, and then brought us back again. So it was kind of really interesting. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, we then kind of get a close to that portion of the story at the end as well, which is nice. It for like a half a second when it happened, I was like, ugh, because I was like, oh, of course he runs into them when he's with the girl.
Yeah,
later on.
Yeah,
and then they live happily ever after. But again,
but there's your gun that went off in Act 3.
It's true. It's true. It's what I say all the time. But the other part of that is kind of looking back to or looking to the end of the story. There were other plot points that didn't get wrapped up by the end of the story that were pretty heavily focused on in this story, right? There were plot threads that were brought up of their friendship as Conclave members, and the fact that Tarek didn't drop that building like he thought. Like it wasn't actually his fault. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, like the Pontiff told him. And so it wasn't his fault. And it might be something that he can use to clear his name, although the witness...
Not really.
Right. I mean, maybe not. But regardless, those plot points didn't get covered up by the end. And so I looked at that and I was like, oh.
I disagree.
Well, okay, go ahead.
Well, because before that point, they're like, they make a point of him mentioning, I do have friends. This is who they are and a little bit about them, super, expositionally, perhaps. But, it was like, I do have friends, and there's quite a handful of them, and this is what they're about. And then, we kind of see that play out in that instance, because they make the point of saying, hey, dude, it wasn't actually your fault. It was my fault. But whatever, who cares? Because you're going to, be my slave forever.
Well, that was the Pontiff. Saying that to them. Yeah.
So, but then, he, at that point, I think he realized that it didn't matter. Like, clearing his name wasn't important anymore, as long as the people who meant something to him and loved him anyway, were still in his life.
Well, the only reason I mentioned
and now he has the new friend of the girl,
right? Bosda and arguably
and
her parents. Yeah, but the reason I bring it up is because at the end of the story, Tarek even says, he's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to clear my name. I don't know if my other two friends are going to be leaving or not, but we're closer, so it's fine. And it's like, that was my big question from this story that I walked away from it with. Was that okay? or was that a cop-out in storytelling? Because what I will say that these stories have done amazingly is made them, in my opinion, the most relatable magic stories that we have ever gotten. Because even though there's magic in the world and a guy can wave his staff and pull all of your belongings to him,
There's
your
realism.
valuables, it's still real struggles that these people are going through. It's not, oh my God, Tezzeret is trying to steal the Stargate that leads to the rest of the multiverse. It's, I need to pay money that I don't have any of to pay back people that I have wronged because I feel like an asshole for them.
Right.
That's real stuff.
Real life.
Yeah. Or, I made a mistake and it hurt people and
now I'm paying for it.
Right. And there are consequences.
Whether monetarily or not.
Right. There are consequences and, I don't feel comfortable going out, or even in this story in particular, the ones that rung truest to me are...
Or I have to disguise myself.
Yes. But the ones that rang truest to me were, I can't go out in public. Not I can't go out in public. My friends are leaving.
Yeah. They're
moving away. Right? And that happens. We're moving. We're not moving that far, but we're moving. But
we moved away from our friends.
Mm-hmm. And closer to others, right? That's just kind of how it works. But yeah, and that happens. That's real life. As you get older, whether you're like a high school student and some of your friends are going to different colleges than you, or even after you're done with school, or you don't go to school but you're practicing a trade or something like that, and some people move away to a different state, they enter different relationships, they have different opportunities, maybe they go overseas. Mm-hmm. And so now they're, whether that's for the military or for travel and pleasure and business, that's a real thing. And you're like, holy crap, what am I going to do? I spend all of my free time with these people and now they're leaving. So these stories are so relatable. And so because these stories are snapshots of a day in the life or an incident in the life of these individual characters, part of my brain says to me, so yes, that is okay. Because at the end of the story is over, but his life is not. And he gets to say, I don't know what's going to happen next with A, B, and C, but I've solved the problem of the disjointedness between my friends and I. We're not disjointed anymore. We're together. We've bonded now. And so everything else will be okay. I'm willing to combat everything else because I have them, because our bounds and bonds, is stronger now.
And that's really the theme of the story.
And that was kind of originally, that's where I ended up. But my initial reaction was that it felt like a cop-out to me. And again, like I said,
to me.
Right. And like I said, I feel like I ended up at the point of, nope, it makes sense for the story. Stop complaining, but that initial reaction was there from me, and so I just was curious if anybody else felt that way. So let me know what were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't feel that way. I kind of approach every story as if it's a snapshot in the lives of the characters that are in it. Mm-hmm. Because unless everyone dies and there is no spirits or whatever in the world of, unless that's the end of the story, there's always more to the story. We just don't get to hear it.
Yeah.
So I kind of approach every story as if it is that anyway. Mm-hmm. But I would say also that I think a lot of times, I think that kind of feeds into that realism that you spoke about. Because I think a lot of times in real life, we do things, we do move, and
it sucks,
and switch jobs, and whatever, make new friends, lose touch with old friends, whatever it is, and those things kind of affect our lives in such a way that we can't say today, oh, well, now our lives are going to suck because those two friends are moving, yes, but as we move along in time and in life, we'll acquire new relationships that can be just as meaningful and lasting, and perhaps our relationships with those people who are moving, are not going away. They're just, it's just going to be different.
Right. And that was the point I was going to bring up, because in fact, you brought that up, where they were moving away and Tarek kind of is very upset, and he's like, what's going to happen now? Everything is over. And your point that you said out loud while I was reading it was just go visit them.
Right.
Just go visit them like Umbrella said, or Umbrella said, because that's just what you're just going to do that. Just go see them. Like, if you want to make the relationship continue, it can continue if both parties do, really, because, if the other party doesn't, it's kind of hard too. But regardless, that's life, right? Go, like Amy said, that relationship can continue or it can end, and either way, it's going to change.
Right.
It's just how much it's going to change and how much you want to work on it enough to make sure that the change is good enough.
And how much you want to allow yourself to be upset or to kind of rise above. Mm-hmm. So if you lose a friendship with someone, instead of seeing it as an ending, just don't. Just kind of move forward and see where the next new friendship takes you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me. And
sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's really hard.
Yeah.
And it kind of breaks our hearts a little bit, but it's part of being human.
Right. And the characters' relationships in this, like I said, relatable, but also a lot more complicated than ours in terms of, they end up going through molten rock on the back of a worm and then getting sworn to servitude to an evil priest or deacon or whatever you want to call it, who has spirits under his purview. But thankfully, the main character, who frankly was on the outs with his friends because his friends finally blew up on him and told him what they had kind of been neglecting telling him, and then kind of went a little bit too far with telling him, because they then started being hurtful in the process, which they didn't intend to do, but it kind of slipped out because they were frustrated. And so it got to the point where, thankfully, his skills were the ones that set them all free in the end, although his actions were the ones that got them in that mess in the first place.
In the first place, yes.
So, yeah. So it's a little, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, but at the same time, like, they were also heroes in that they stopped this from happening because, and this is another point that I think goes to the overarching story of Guilds of Ravnica that we're getting a taste of, and that I guess we're going to get a continuation of in the book when the book comes out early next year. And I wrote it down here. He says that he's reminded of the fact that most of Ravnica is focused on individual wants and gains. And so when someone like Azor showed up and set up the rule of law in that city, and then left because he was like, these guys got it. Right. They'll be fine. I'm a genius.
Yeah, I'll just move on to the next, plane in need of my expertise.
Yeah, and save them too, and, save everybody, and everyone's going to love me.
You're so full of yourself for no reason.
It's all right. Now he's the king of useless islands.
Yeah,
so, thanks,
Napoleon.
Jace. Yeah. Napoleon.
That's what I call him now.
Mm-hmm. And so now you have the city that is now, like, the guilds are warring within themselves, but also among themselves. They're, like, pushing against their bonds because the Living Guild Pact isn't around anymore to hold them down like they're supposed to. And so sure enough, there's now a power vacuum. Yeah. I wonder who's going to come and fill that power vacuum. What, like, big creature with, like, some underlings, some of whom work within Ravnica already? Who could possibly come in and exploit that?
No one.
No idea.
And
no
that
idea
never
at all.
happens in the scope of history or storytelling or anything.
It's good storytelling. But so I really liked that. I liked that phrase. I picked that phrase out on purpose because it's that little glimpse of, hey, these are fun individual stories that, again, we have been asking for a very long time. But not only is it little individual stories, but it's so much more overarching than that, because you get to see how these individual people's lives are being affected by the overall, if you want to call it this, political culture on Ravnica at this point. And really, I mean, seemingly just societal structure on Ravnica at this point. Just how the people are living their day-to-day lives as well.
You know, just the sociological aspect of it, because it's kind of more, at this point, I think partially because of that power vacuum, it's not quite the same thing.
Right.
You know?
And I do have to say, I think I want to give my overall opinions on this stuff at a later date. Because as we try to do, I want to give this story its time. But I will say that things like that, where it references back to the main story as we understand it, or as we know it's about to happen, the story spotlight cards from the set that we haven't seen in these stories in particular, those frustrate me because...
My hair is bothering me.
That frustrates Amy.
It's very tickly.
It frustrates me because I want to know what's going on main story-wise. And I enjoy these little stories, but I think that there needs to be somewhat of a balance, because we've asked for these little stories doing such awesome character development. And this should take not a single thing away from Nikki Drayden, because I think she did a fantastic job over these past 5 weeks. But I think that a balance should be struck between these little mini stories where we get to do character studies and the bigger overarching story that we would like to see. I mean, there's going to be a novel, and the novel discussion is, like I said, is probably the one for a different time. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think,
I mean, I loved this story because it's very Indiana Jones, which is one of my favorite things.
That's true. That's very true.
It's involving artifacts and, burrowing underground into, old basilicas and all of that stuff.
Using like local animals to your benefit, or, to help you out or whatever.
Throwing magic beans and winding up with, vines that entangle your enemies and...
Dryads, druids, Luxodon, like
this story had it all
trainers.
For me.
Yeah, and it really is cool. I mean, and you're Gruul, so it's half of your color identity in green. But yeah, it was a great story. Like I said, I think all these were great. Like I said, there was one a few weeks ago where I said that it was the worst so far, but that it was still great. That it was still a great story. It just wasn't as good as the other stories from this set of stories. And then last week I said that I thought it was the best. So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, this one was the best.
Yeah, I think these all worked out quite nicely. And once again, a huge thank you to Nikki Drayden.
Yeah.
If you're watching this. But even if you're not, she did an amazing job. And if you want to go thank her, feel free to do that as well.
And I actually just wanted to say that I think Nikki Drayden's stories are really great. And definitely fun standalones, but great as a small unit.
Yes.
And I like that it was these stories that were sort of the in between, because I think the main stories, as you put it, are kind of they're sort of the main show, or the and then whatever comes in between is just kind of, okay, now we have to read this story or listen to this podcast or do whatever, and we have to film JaAR based on that and just hope that it's something that people even want to watch. And I think these are great stories for that.
Oh yeah. And like I said, it was something that we've been asking for a while, and it did not disappoint. I think I think that now that it's done, I think that a further discussion is warranted on where did it work and where did it not, and what are our thoughts, can't speak, but what are our thoughts on what, if anything, could be done to improve it in the future? Just because I think that that's worth some discussion. And if your thoughts are that, you know, we should just be grateful that we got this because we've been asking for it, that's not an unfair statement.
That's a valid thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
there were plenty of times where we were like, really? Come on, Wizards. Can you do something for us, please?
And so because of that, like, are we being unfair in asking for these little stories, but then as soon as we get them, also asking for the main stories?
Right.
So, you know, is it like, well, we give you what you ask for and then you're not happy, and so then you ask for something else and then we give you that and then you're not happy? Like, is that fair, or is this truly just, because I think this is just our way of saying, like, here's our critique, like, you gave it to us, it worked out very nicely, but don't do it at the detriment of your main story. Find a way to have that happy medium. And we will see, because they were cagey about it, but we will see what this December surprise is going to be for the Beloved Plane, or whatever they called it, that's coming back. We'll see what that is and what those holiday surprises are going to be for us going into the holiday season, going into December. Like I said, JaAR will be off next week, but we will still have a video up. I'm not exactly sure what it's going to be yet. It might be me drafting Cube again, like an old Mitgo Cube draft. Joe sucks at Cube, FYI. I'm real bad, but feel free to watch me, you know.
Amy sucks at any kind of Magic play. Speaking of which, watch our videos on Arena.
That's the two of us playing some Arena, and those come out every Monday. Like I said, we'll see what we can put up for Thursday, but for next week. But also, I wanted to point out before we go away. First of all, this weekend, obviously it depends on when you're watching this, but we're putting this video out on Thursday. After Thursday is Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday. On Saturday and Sunday,
I never knew.
Yeah, crazy. On Saturday and Sunday, the 17th and 18th, I believe. Yes, on the 17th and 18th of November, if you are in or near the Saratoga, New York area, Amy and I will be at Saratoga Comic-Con. We are going to be there all weekend, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. If you're going to be anywhere near there and you're into nerdy things or geeky things like we are,
come see us.
And if you're watching this video and you've gotten this far, I assume you're at least into Magic. And P.S., last year there was a Magic artist there. So, and there probably will be this year too, because he lives really close to the convention center.
He's incredible.
He's the best.
We have a photo with him.
He was really.
I'm sure you probably saw on Twitter if you're.
Yes, if you follow us on Twitter, and I'm sure we'll see him again this year. Talk to him again because he's just such a nice guy. Richard Kane Ferguson, if you care, the author, the artist who drew the original Dokken Blackblade art. For the Blackblade Reforged that just came back in Dominaria. The guy who originally wielded the blade, not Belzenlock, despite his propaganda. It was Dokken Blackblade. So Richard Kane Ferguson, the guy who did that art, was there. Such a nice guy. But that's really neither here nor there. You should just come out because it's a great time. We will be helping out at the Insane Games booths.
Yes.
Selling some geek gear, a lot of pop figurines, so if that's your thing, come on out. They should
have more than one table.
Oh, they will, absolutely, because the pop figurines and the geek gear will be at one table. That's likely where Amy will be. And then at the video game table is likely where I will be. And we have they have a lot of old school gaming type things, like console games. So NES, SNES, Sega Nintendo, holy crap, Sega Genesis, N64, things like that. Come out and... I mean, I can't tell you how many people last year just came up to the table and went, oh my God, my childhood, and just looked down at the table and just enjoyed themselves. And you're more than welcome to do that. And obviously, come out and say hi to Amy and I. Yeah. Because, we'd love to see you.
Yeah.
And
we'll be at those tables anyway, so it'd be great to see somebody who watches our videos. That'd be so cool.
And the tickets are cheap. I don't know offhand the exact price, but it's like less than $20 if I remember correctly per person. And they have some pretty sweet guests. They have the food is fine, right?
Yeah.
No issues with the food.
They had quite a variety last year, if I recall.
Yeah. If you like root beer, cream soda, things like that, they have some sweet stuff there for that as well.
They do.
So, and great exhibitors and guests as well. So definitely worth your time if you're in the area. Please stop by. We would love to see you because we're going to have a blast regardless. But if you're with us, it'll probably be even that much better.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you guys so much for watching this episode of JaAR. Thank you for allowing that plug if you are still here. But yeah, we will be back with JaAR in like 2 weeks, like we said. Beginning of December, we'll see what those stories are going to be.
But like we said, there will be a video on Wednesday.
Yes, on Thursday.
Next
Thursday. That's fine.
We film Wednesday.
Yes. And so Monday and Thursday, there will still be videos coming out despite the move. So be ready, be prepared for that. And we will... and we will see you guys in those videos. And... like I said, that is the end of this. And in fact, if you come out to see us at Saratoga Comic-Con, maybe you can show off your...
#Vorthos Pride.
The rest of the Insane Games guys don't fully know about a ton of Vorthos stuff, so show it off to them too.
Yeah.
So thank you guys so much for watching this episode. It has been another episode of JaAR, like I said, here on Geek for All. I have been Joe.
And I'm Amy.
And as we always say, guys, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.